Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Friday, August 19th, I'm Therese Garnier sitting in for Roland. Coming up today on Roland Unfiltered, streaming live on Black Star Network, we have the Department of Justice saying that Florida Republicans specifically targeted Black voters with the new voting restrictions. Now, we're going to talk to co-founder of Black Voters Matter, Cliff Albright, to find out what that means for the upcoming primary. Also, Florida's election police make their first arrest. There's going to be a police shortage hitting the U.S., and we're going to talk to the new president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives about what needs to be done to get more good cops on our streets. Also, we're going to explore if there's a difference in ideologies of the GOP and the KKK. Also, a fourth officer connected to Breonna Taylor's death no longer has a job. And lastly, in our Education Matters segment, we'll talk about Microsoft's TechSpark initiative to expand the cybersecurity readiness program at Jackson State University. Well, guys, you know what time it is. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
The Justice Department claims Florida Republicans intentionally targeted Black voters with restrictions which will surely hamper turnout in the upcoming midterm election. Now, Wednesday's filing stems from Florida's SB 90 law restricting the availability of absentee ballot drop boxes, regulations for third-party voter registration groups, and a ban on providing food and water to people standing in line to vote. Now, the DOJ stated to the federal appellate court that they agreed with Judge Mark Walker's ruling to block new restrictions, adding that they believe the law was enacted due to a surge of Black voter turnout in the state. Cliff Albright, co-founder of Black Voters Matter, joins me from Atlanta. Cliff.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us. So tell me, what's your thoughts on this lawsuit?
Yeah, I mean, our thoughts on this lawsuit have been pretty clear, especially since we're one of the litigants, one of the plaintiffs and not just this case, but a couple of cases against DeSantis in the state of Florida. But yeah, we definitely agree with what the Department of Justice is arguing in their supportive brief. We're thankful to see the Department of Justice once again weighing in on this. Of course, the department has actually filed lawsuits in a couple of other states, including in Georgia. But we're glad to see that in this situation where they're not necessarily filing, but filing a supportive brief, that they agree with our position. And if they agree with the original court position, we got to keep in mind that the original court that heard this case, not only did they say that what DeSantis and the state of Florida had tried to do was unconstitutional, they said it was so egregious that it had targeted black voters so much that they actually they ruled that the state of Florida be banned from being able to pass, basically that they get waived into the same pre-clearance type arrangement that used to exist under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. They said that for 10 years before Florida can do anything like this, that they would have to have, such efforts be reviewed and pre-cleared. That's how egregious that the original court said that it was. So we're glad to see that the Department of Justice is taking sides with that, which is no small thing because, as we all know, the Department of Justice is usually very hesitant to weigh in on cases unless they've got some very clear evidence and they feel that there's a strong case of discrimination.
And how inhumane is that to limit people from being able to drink water or eat food when you're standing in a long line in Florida where temperatures can get very high and humidity as well? So, I mean, just that in itself seems very inhumane. Now, I want to go to our panelists and also get their take on what's going on. Joining me right now, I have Michael Imhotep. He's the host of the African History Network show. We also have Matt Manning, a civil rights attorney, and we also have Dr. Nyambi Carter from Howard University's Department of Political Science. Thank you all for joining us today. And so I wanted to get your thoughts as well on this lawsuit, and then I'm also going to talk about some arrests that were made, but we'll get to that next after you answer what your thoughts are on this lawsuit.
Who's that question for?
Whoever wants to go first.
I would just say, this was certainly necessary, given that the inhumanity of the treatment of black voters in the state of Florida. I mean, that's ultimately what this is about. And even the provisions about food and water is about access to the ballot box. If people didn't have to wait for hours in heat and other kinds of terrible conditions, they wouldn't need to pack a lunch and bring water. And that's also about making this process as difficult, as cumbersome, as uncomfortable as possible to dissuade people from participating in the electoral process. So, this lawsuit is probably going to be one of many, quite frankly, that we're going to see in Florida, but in also other states around the country that are trying to model themselves after Georgia and other places that are going after black voters with everything they have.
And do you see there potentially being any pushback?
From
those who were pushing to make it difficult for people to vote?
Oh, absolutely. Never underestimate white supremacy to continue with all the tenacity it has. And look, they will change the rules. We see them do all kinds of things to prevent black voters from being involved, and in particular from changing the makeup of state houses, of the gubernatorial offices and other things. This is not small stakes here. And that's why I think we will see sort of other kinds of morphing into other kinds of attempts to harm black voters.
Now, what examples can you give of other instances where people may try to enact different things to discourage people from going to vote?
So, you remember maybe about 10 years ago in Pennsylvania, for example, they didn't change a law, but what they did is erected billboards about election fraud. And in particular, in communities with high concentrations of black voters and other minorities, which was an attempt to harm people. In North Carolina, right, we saw regular citizens challenging other citizens' right to vote, because in that state, you actually could do that and potentially have someone's voting record stricken, right? So people might not know, for example, that they have been taken off the rolls because there was a challenge to their participation. We've also seen, I mean, in Tennessee, right? Look at what happened to Nashville and the way they carved up Nashville to effectively prevent Black voters in that region from participating. So there's both sort of the legal apparatus of reapportionment, right, that we do through gerrymandering, but there's also these sort of other non-legal things that people do to make the process difficult for people to participate in, because intimidation is always available and usually always free.
Now let's go over to Matt Manning, civil rights attorney. Kind of explain to us how individual civil rights are being impeded on with these new rulings that they were trying to make, and why this lawsuit's so important.
First off, good evening to everyone, and thank you for having me. Look, the simple thing is, in 2022, particularly with the advent of technology, it should be considerably easier to vote now than it ever has been, and we shouldn't be implementing things like, not allowing people to have water and food in the lines. What it comes down to is, I live and practice in Texas, and Texas did the same thing, where they tried to cut down the number of ballot drop boxes in Harris County, which is where Houston sits, down to something like 1 when you have 4 million people who live in that county alone. So basically, people's right to vote is being impeded, particularly where Republicans in this state and in other states, in Florida, for instance, are putting in everything that they possibly can to make it harder, as Dr. Carter said, I think brilliantly, to go vote. This is about affecting access to the polls. And in addition to that, 1.9 million Black voters, from my understanding, participated in the 2020 election in Florida. So from the part of the lawsuit I was able to read, or rather the Department of Justice's brief, I mean, they're saying it's very clear that what the Florida legislature was doing was responding to that. And the law doesn't even require that those voting apparatuses that they try to put in place to prevent access necessarily be the sole reason be discriminatory impact. But here, it's obvious that that was the genesis behind it. So, people's right under the Constitution to have the right to vote is what's being abridged here, and that creates a constitutional issue.
How difficult would it be for citizens to file lawsuits if they feel that their rights were being impeded on in upcoming elections?
To be honest with you, that's probably a better question for Cliff, just because I'm not as well versed in the individual person's right. But I will say I'm glad that Black Voters Matter and League of Women Voters, which for your viewers is important to know, one of the seminal Florida voting cases as it relates to state voting issues in Florida is another League of Women Voters case. So I think citizens getting together with other citizens through organizations like Black Voters Matter are particularly important, because it shows that it's not a one-off. It shows that y'all are attacking all of us, and we're standing together to not allow that to happen. So in terms of the actual mechanism, I'm not positive. But in terms of the group mechanism, as we see here with Black Voters Matter being one of the plaintiffs, I think it's important that there's that galvanization to show that there are many people standing together.
Cliff, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked the question, because that's actually, the crux of the reason why the Voting Rights Act was so important, and why Section 5 and Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is so important, because what we know is this: it is difficult for individuals, when individually wrong, to then have to bring a case saying that they took away my right to vote, they wouldn't let me register, et cetera, right? That's how come having that pre-clearance to preempt states from even passing such discriminatory laws is so important, because it's a hard burden for individuals to take that up. It's a hard burden for organizations like ours to take that up. It takes time, it takes resources, it takes money, it takes legal support. It can't be done at the individual level. That's why we've got to have strong federal voting rights legislation that keeps it from even getting to this point. And think about the reverse, right? Think if you're one of these people, I don't want to jump ahead in your stories, but if you're one of these people who's been arrested because of whether you're Crystal Mason in Texas, or like some of these people that have now been arrested in Florida, again, as an individual, to have to defend yourself, right, to have to get legal support, to have to go through that at the individual level is very difficult. That's why it's important that we have the ability for organizations, civil rights groups, some of the incredible attorneys that have been working on these cases to be able to preemptively deal with these things, or for the federal government to have to pre-clear to keep us from even getting to this point, to keep individuals from having to bear the brunt of their own voter suppression.
Now, we haven't heard from Michael yet. Michael, what are your thoughts? And historically, how difficult do you think it'll be for this lawsuit to go through and not push us back in the dark ages where we're being limited on how we can vote?
Well, Florida being a former Confederate state, Florida and Georgia and Texas, they're trying to take us back to before 1870. And Florida, it's important to note that Florida was the first state to have poll taxes in this country in 1889. And then in 1890, when Mississippi had their state convention, and the white county judge who presided over the Mississippi State Convention said, we are here to exclude the Negro. And this was in a state that had a majority black population, the state of Mississippi. They imposed poll taxes and literacy tests. And this became known as the Mississippi Plan, which was adopted by the other former Confederate states to suppress the African-American vote, South Carolina, Louisiana, Georgia, North Carolina, et cetera. So what the Department of Justice here is doing is excellent. This would not have happened under the Donald Trump Department of Justice. And this is in the tradition of why the Department of Justice was created in 1870 during Reconstruction. They were created largely to protect the new rights of African Americans, protect African American elected officials who were being attacked by the Ku Klux Klan and the White League and things like this, protect white Republicans who many of them were allies of African Americans, and to crack down on the Ku Klux Klan and protect voting rights as well, especially after the 15th Amendment of 1870. So this is in the tradition of why the Department of Justice was created. So once again, we would not have a Merrick Garland, we would not have a Kristen Clark as a assistant of the Civil Rights Division, Assistant Attorney General of the Civil Rights Division, if African Americans did not go out and vote. And we have a lot of this to owe to Black Lives Matter, Cliff Albright, Latasha Brown, Stacey Abrams, and others. 16.9 million African Americans voted, 49 million white people, 9.7 million Latinos to put Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the White House. So this is an example of how elections have consequences.
Well, thank you all. I'm going to come back with another question. I just want to preface it with the arrests that were made. So I'm going to go to that story, and then we're going to come back to you guys. So right now, 20 people are set to be charged in Florida for voting illegally. Now, these will be the first arrests since the Office of Election Crimes and Security started investigating fraud. Now, Governor Ron DeSantis created the department following the 2020 election, and he says these individuals weren't allowed to vote because of previous felonies.
The state of Florida has charged and is in the process of arresting 20 individuals across the state for voter fraud. Now, the majority of these people illegally voted in Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade. These folks voted illegally in this case, and there's going to be other grounds for other prosecutions in the future. They are disqualified from voting because they've been convicted of either murder or sexual assault, and they do not have the right to vote.
Now, additional reviews and investigations are ongoing. Voter fraud is considered a third-degree felony, with each facing up to 5 years in prison. Now, let's go back to our panelists. What are your thoughts on this new development?
Well, this is to be expected from Ron DeSantis, and Florida needs to be desanitized. And this is what I warned people about Ron DeSantis when he ran against Andrew Gillum. And Andrew Gillum was correct when they had the debate. And Andrew Gillum said, I'm not calling Mr. DeSantis a racist. I'm saying the racists believe Mr. DeSantis is a racist. So these are the tactics that they try. Now, if we go back a couple of years ago, we remember the effort to restore the voting rights to ex-felons, to returning citizens in Florida. And Roland covered this a lot here on the show. It passed overwhelmingly They needed, I think, 66% of the voters to pass it. It passed overwhelmingly. Then the Republican-dominated state legislature, the white supremacists, the white nationalist party, what they did was they instituted an additional stipulation that you had to pay all your fees and all your restitution, things like this, before you could vote. Okay, so this felony disenfranchisement literally goes back to 1870. Right around that time when the 15th Amendment, which gave African-American men the right to vote, became law. This is where we see these former Confederate states start to impose laws that strip people of their right to vote if they are ex-offenders. So each one of these cases have to be investigated. In the case with Crystal Mason in Texas, she was actually given the wrong information that she could vote. So Ron DeSantis, and once again, Florida needs to be desanitized. Ron DeSantis makes it seem like these people intended to break the law and vote one time and risk going to jail. Okay, so we need to deal with them at the ballot box.
And that's also going to prison again, right? Because these are talking about people who are returning citizens. So you're talking about reincarcerating people for doing something that they couldn't do on their own. They went through the registration process, right? So if there was any kind of complication, that should have been caught by the state. And so to put the burden then on citizens to say, well, you have to know whether you're clear, when you're talking about people who've had to move through all kinds of hurdles to even get to this place. And as Michael just noted, the goalposts kept moving along the way. And I think we also have to think about the kinds of crimes that are singled out for exclusion forever from voting, right? I mean, the goal is to bring people into the process. But when you say, well, there are certain kinds of crimes that leave you beyond citizenship, we have to be really careful about that. And I think really thoughtful about that, because crimes are also racialized, right? So right around the time that Michael is talking about when they were putting these voter disenfranchisement laws, they were also deciding what kind of crimes became felonies because they thought certain kinds of crimes were Black crimes, right? And so we have to be really mindful that this is a part of a very long project to criminalize and to exclude Black people of all stripes, because those folks, even if they are formerly incarcerated, are still citizens. And that's something we have to reckon with and we have to acknowledge.
And for those who think that there was a lot of voter fraud during the recent election, let's just say these 20 people that were arrested, that wouldn't have change the election results.
Absolutely not. It's a statistical nothing.
And can I just say, Doc is exactly right and Michael's exactly right. And we have to be very clear. This was the purpose of DeSantis creating this so-called election police force, right? The whole purpose was twofold. One, to go after folks like these first 20, because we got to keep in mind, not only do you have this situation where you have folks who aren't quite clear about which crimes were included and what the process is, even when they, as Michael said, even when they went back and they made the process of getting your rights restored for those who have been formerly incarcerated, when they made it more difficult, what they also did was create a situation where they're not even helping people to even know what those fines and fees are. So even if you want to pay it, oftentimes you can't get the correct information. So they are creating a situation the same way like they create long lines and then they want to prosecute you for supporting people with long lines. They have created a situation where they are making it more difficult, in fact, impossible for you to be able to pay off those fines and fees and get your rights back. And then they're sending out this new police force in order to capture you. You might as well just call it an election slave patrol. They created this force to go out and capture people and put them in the same situation that they've now done with this first 20. This is just the first batch that we're going to see of a bunch that they're going to go after. Again, people that did not have adequate information for a process that was made unnecessarily and intentionally cumbersome. This was the plan all along. This is not a bug. This is the feature of what their intentions were.
Now, is there a system that's set up, or should there be? What kind of system can they set up to help these individuals get those alerts, get the notifications, get the documents that they need to make sure that they're doing all those steps right? Does something like that exist? If so, can you tell us more? And if not, what do you think needs to be developed to help these individuals so something like this doesn't happen?
Is that for me? Well, yeah, I mean, that exists. It exists in other states, right? What it should be is that you shouldn't have to jump through those hoops, right? It should be automatic that you once you do your time, even to the extent that you even think that those rights should have been taken away at all, right? Which is debatable in and of itself, right? But if you're going to say that it was, then when you complete your time, then you get those rights back, and that you don't have to jump through these hoops and do the paperwork or know exactly what a fine and fee is. That's the way that it could be and should be, and that's the way that it actually exists in a couple of states. They don't. Their intention was never to have people actually get their voting rights back. Their original purpose was to make it difficult, to keep them in the same situation that they were in when they were first arrested and convicted of the felony to begin with. That's what we have to fight against. We need to get rid of the entire notion of felony disenfranchisement for all the reason that just it is rooted in slavery. Right, and so we have got to, and rooted in the post-Reconstruction period, we have got to get rid of it altogether.
Well, thank you all for giving us your input on that. I have to take it to a break, but for our viewers that are just now tuning in, this is Roland Martin Unfiltered on Black Star Network. We're taking it to a break, but we'll be right back.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Next on the Black Table with me, Greg Carr. The enormous impact of race, education, and affirmative action in America, and how, believe it or not, white America is starting to feel a little bit of the pain. Dr. Natasha Waraku joins us with a case study of one suburban community and how it reacted when the minority students started to excel.
Most people didn't say this explicitly, but was that, the academics standards are getting higher in part because of the Asian kids, and that is making our kids really stressed out. So we need to reduce the amount of homework teachers are allowed to assign.
She shares a perspective that you don't want to miss. That's on the next Black Table, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
This is Judge Mathis.
Hi, I'm Teresa Griffin.
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Police departments across the country are facing severe staffing shortages. Now, the struggle to recruit and retain officers is causing many departments to find innovative ways to fill those gaps. Now, those gaps may force New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell to cancel next year's Mardi Gras festivities due to the city's significant police shortage. But reports say that these shortages coincide with a spike in crime across the nation, and the rate of violent crimes in the U.S. in 2020 rose for the first time in years, with the number of murder rates spiking by 30%. So, what's the plan to hire more officers? Well, joining us now is the new president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, Brenda Andrews. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely. So let's take a deep dive into this. We may have to cancel some festivities, a festival that's known by the entire country because of these shortages. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, to give my thoughts, I think I need to give a little context and a little, perspective, into this. NOBLE, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, was founded in 1976 in Washington, D.C. And the two things that NOBLE was started on was one about urban crime in our cities, and also the lack of promotional opportunities for African American officers. So that was 1976, and in 2022, we're having pretty much that same conversation. As the years went on, a lot of officers in the 70s and the early 80s, there was a big push for officers in the inner city, especially in communities of color like Detroit, where I'm from, and many other urban cities, to have the police department be reflective of that particular community. So it was a big, big push for hiring, women, minorities, people of color through the latter part of the 70s and through the 80s. Now you have to know during that time, there was crime. There was a lot of crime going on. It was during the drug trade, during the crack cocaine, the heroin. So there was spikes in gang wars, was spikes in crime, even then. So I wanted to put it in that context so we know that this is not a new phenomena. But during that time, we had, yes, more officers, and we also had more, population, but crime was also high. We had to make adjustments and do different things. So as we move forward now to the 21st century, and I was having this discussion earlier today in a meeting, is that after that big push of the 70s and 80s, we kind of took our eyes off of recruiting. Not that we didn't recruit, but we did recruit, but we probably didn't recruit with the same urgency that we have now, and it was an urgency then. So we recruited, we brought people in, but we didn't pay attention to how many people were leaving. And this was just in good times, in normal times. And I ran recruiting for the Detroit Police Department, and this was something I did. One year I had to hire 200 officers because we hadn't hired in a while. So it's a lot of factors that go into this that leads us to where we are now. Some police departments, because of budgets, had not hired, in years. Different other things has affected that, and they maybe didn't have active recruiting campaigns. And so now when we have things that happen in our cities and cries for defunding the police, a sentiment of anti-policing, budgets, politics, polarization, when you start combining all of that, then we end up in the crisis we're in now. So I really want to kind of drive that point to say, this is not the first time that we've been here, but now we have to think of some ways on how do we dig ourselves, out of this hole. And one other point I'd like to make is that recruiting we should have been recruiting and doing things actively, all along. And one thing that I did was keep up with attrition. who's leaving your department every year. I look to see who was eligible for retirements in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, 5 years. And that way you could make a plan of succession. And if you had something that really happened devastating, then you were able to maybe pivot, and get people into your department. So, here we are, today with these shortages, mass shortages, not only in local policing, state policing, and also in our federal agencies. And that was something that was kind of unheard of in prior years, that our federal agencies were having problems recruiting as well.
Do you feel that there's a fear as to why they're unable to recruit? Now, the reason why I ask this, for instance, during the George Floyd protest, I was out in front of the White House, myself getting shot with rubber bullets and getting pepper sprayed, and I saw individuals they saw black officers and they were screaming at them traitor, or different things of that nature, and going after them as well. So do you feel that maybe one of the things that contributes to this is maybe that fear that they don't want to be seen? Yes, they want to help their community, but they also don't want to be seen as a traitor as well. Do you see any of that maybe playing into that?
Some of that might, play into it, that double standard, where as an African American officer, this is your community. This is the community that you live in, your family lives in. But at the same time, you've taken an oath to protect and serve. So I'm sure some officers are, conflicted. But at the end of the day, when we raise our hand, it is to protect and serve, the communities, regardless to the composition of the community.
Well, let's take it over to our panelists. I'm sure they have some questions for you as well. All right, who wants to go first? Let's have Michael go first.
All right, my Detroit sister, Brenda Goss Andrews. How you doing today?
Fine. How are you?
All right. I've lived in Detroit 51 years, so I remember some of those times that you talked
and you're
about.
Here now, not in Detroit now?
I live in Detroit now. Yeah, 51 years. Yep, downtown Detroit. So recently, going back to right around July 21st, President Joe Biden announced his Safer America plan. And it's going to, it's in the 2023 budget, it's going to allocate a total of $37 billion, put 100,000 new officers on the street. There's going to be $3 billion to help communities clear court backlogs and solve homicides. There's a $15 billion grant program to prevent violent crime and reroute police resources in nonviolent cases, and also $5 billion for community violence intervention programs. Can you talk about initiatives like that, what you know so far about the Safer America plan? And one thing that I've been advocating for is when we have police departments that are hiring, especially in the African American community, African Americans need to apply and get these jobs so we can become the type of officers we say we want to see. Officers that de-escalate situations, treat people with respect their humanity, only use lethal force as a last result after you exhausted other methods. Can you address that also, please?
Yes, and I did kind of in my opening when I wanted to give a historical context, as you know, in the 70s when they were hiring, and many officers during that time period were hired through federal funding. I think CETA, I can't think of the acronym now, but many, especially in the inner city, federal funding had come in so that they could have this big push for hiring officers of color, and a lot of women came on during that time as well.
Right.
So I'm seeing this as a resurgence of what has been done before, but putting more resources, into it for hiring, but also the other components that go with it as well. So certainly noble, we view that as a positive, but the other side is that you still have to get them through the door. You still have to get them to want to apply, and we have to do a good job of doing that. But it's not just up to the police department to do it. It's up to all of us, people like you, the media, our churches. Everyone has to become an ambassador, for this, to encourage people to join, be the solution, to the problems. and join. So it's not just, one entity that can do this. And now we're, so far in the hole that it's just going to take the whole village to really get out there and start, recruiting. And Noble, we're going to be doing a lot of different things, working with communities and also leveraging social media now. And I said one way to reach, especially our younger people and generation, is through social media and telling our story. There we can't use some of the old-fashioned tactics, even though
Right.
old-fashioned tactics sometimes work. We used to walk in the barber shop and the beauty salons and talk to people in there, as well. So we are excited, about this, but having more money does not mean that people will come through the door. You still have to be actively recruiting. You still have to go out and get people to come in. And one other point I wanted to make is a lot of times other cultures, they have a legacy of policing. Their fathers and grandfathers and
Right.
great grandparents, have been police. And we have not had that long history. We're beginning to now, after several decades, seeing, our children following that profession. So other ethnicities have always enjoyed that legacy where they just automatically, follow that and come to the police department. And we've not had that. We're seeing more of that legacy kind of hiring and people coming through the door.
Thank you.
Brenda, what are things that the regular average citizen can do to kind of encourage others to take an interest in pursuing that as a career?
Well, I think just as I was saying, you can invite your local police department in to speak. Everyone knows someone that's a police officer in their family and their churches. And sometimes you just come in not in uniform, just, dress regular and talk to people, talk to our youth groups. It's so many outreach and community outreach, even your block clubs. So I just want to tell the community that outreach, must be ongoing. And you must use the people that are in your community. I'd rather hear from, my aunt or my cousin or a friend or somebody that I know that is on the police department to come and talk. So I think we just have to kind of take it to the streets. We can leverage, technology, but sometimes we have to just be old fashioned about it and word of mouth and going into the communities and going into the churches and just really having a conversation, a roundtable conversation. I know Noble, we're planning, some virtual, conversations or job fairs so that people can understand what some of the opportunities are. And I think people don't know is every opportunity in law enforcement, from the sciences, especially when you factor in, your federal entities, there is something for everyone in law enforcement. And I think we just need to illuminate to our young people, especially those that are coming out of college, that there is a place in law enforcement for you. We have to make this profession look more attractive to our young people.
Can one of the things that they're doing include the pay, incentives, any bonuses?
Now that, yes, but budgets is always at the top, and hopefully this federal funding, will help relieve some of the budgeting. But there's not a lot, municipalities can do. It's based on a lot of times their tax base and the citizens' willingness to, pay more money. And as we've heard through the years, some communities have just given up their police departments and have allowed maybe county police or state police someone to patrol, their areas because they just didn't have, the funding. So that is a problem that is a little bit harder to solve with the pay, and benefits. And a lot of times in the urban setting, suburban police departments are able to pay, more. Their tax base is greater. And sometimes we don't lose officers to law enforcement, but you might lose them to another agency. So we just ask Noble, we're asking, governments and city councils to really, drill down on your budgets, and kind of look and see where you can put more money, into hiring, more money into salaries, improving benefits, offering incentives, bonuses, and that they have to get a little bit more creative. You don't have the money, you have to become creative. So I think that's something that now municipalities and councils are really going to have to look at.
And to put that into perspective, salaries range. The lowest is 40,000, the median is 66,000, and the highest pay is 105,000. So those are kind of the ranges of police pay. Now, before we go to a break, I want to see if any of the other panelists have any questions for Ms. Andrews.
I do. I want to know two things quickly. Is there any plans to extend programs like we saw or like we see at Lincoln University, where they're trying to do police academies at HBCUs to go after the kinds of young people that you're talking about? And I guess the other, it's a slightly different question, but we've seen in the wake of some of these police department resignations, the ascendance of sort of Black police chiefs or leaders in those places, and people saying, we won't work for this person, particularly if this person is a reformer or is viewed as being hostile to business as usual. And so I guess on the backside of that is do you see any of these sort of resignations as being driven by changes once we see Black and other kinds of police chiefs come to the fore and say, we need to be more responsive and thoughtful about communities and less, cracking skulls and things like that?
Okay, well, to answer, I think the first question about HBCUs, Noble, has been working with, HBCUs, and we're going to do more in the next year, visiting some of our HBCU. I'm an HBCU graduate, Howard University, also. So we will expand some of the things that we're doing with Noble and our youth component to visit HBCUs and work with them a little more, closely as well. And your second question dealt with, you said police chiefs, kind of summarize that again for me, please.
I guess the question is sort of, are Black police chiefs, who we saw many of them hired in the wake of George Floyd and others, being set up for failure, right? Being put in departments that are really resistant to change, and therefore finding, officers who are saying, we're just not going to work for this person any longer, or we're just going to stop work and kind of sabotage. And so I'm wondering if some of this movement out of these police forces, like we saw in New Orleans, which sort of opened, is driven by mayors like Mayor Cantrell and even police chiefs who suggest that we have to do better in our policing, and we can't use, the tactics of old, and we actually have to be serious about corruption and use of force and other things like that.
Well, I think a lot of this certainly deals with, racism, sexism, it's in the country. The Band-Aid has been pulled off. Not that racism and sexism ever went away, but the Band-Aid got pulled off, to reveal these ugly wounds. So that's what we're dealing with. And that's what a lot of our police chiefs, they're walking into, those kind of communities, those kinds of sentiments. And yes, I've read some of the articles and things that have been said that it seems as though they're putting, our African American chiefs in troubled communities or in urban, settings. I think that a lot of these communities are looking for, solutions. They're looking for people that can come in and offer something to the community, something that will make a calmer, community. And I think they're saying, especially with women, and certainly the research is showing that women police and women executives bring a calmer, de-escalating effect to most situations. So I think we're seeing that, but yes, in some departments, they are still dealing with, racism. We're still dealing with sexism, and I think that's something as a country that all of us need to continue talking about and continue offering solutions, because that is the issue. That's the overarching issue, in this country.
Matt, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a very quick question, but let me first say that I'm proud to hear you're also a Howard graduate. Anytime I hear Howard, I got to show it's love. But the question for you is real quick. How do you see that there's an opportunity for policing to improve in this moment? And I ask because I know that there are also shortages of prosecutors around many places in the country. And what you see those offices doing is cracking down on what crimes they're either not going to prosecute or making themselves more efficient. So kind of following that same thought process, how do you think policing in this moment, even with fewer boots on the ground, can either be more efficient or more effective? Because recruiting efforts are not going to fix the problem necessarily in the short term, right? So what are your thoughts in respect to how policing in general can be improved in this moment with smaller police staffs, if it can?
It certainly can be improved. I'm glad you brought up prosecutors. So we've read, stories about sometimes clashes and different, points of view between police and prosecutors. And we both come with different perspectives and training. So I think it's important that, we do sit down at the table, that we do sit down and have, these hard conversations or these uncomfortable conversations, because at the end of the day, we want what's best for the community. We want to serve and protect the community. So to have more information sharing, more dialogue between prosecutors, between police, and through the community, more a holistic approach to this. And I spoke on this with another group recently, that no one group can solve this. Educators, police, medical professionals, and Noble is going to do something like this to bring together some professionals to tackle some of these issues. So I think, to answer your question, yes, continued dialogue, but you have to recognize that it's a problem. And I think we all recognize there is a problem in this country. And with that, we need to sit down and honestly, have these conversations. And we need to have them often and frequently.
Well, you know what, Ms. Andrews, I want to thank you so much for coming on and explaining all of that to us today. We got to take it to a quick break, but just for our viewers, in case you didn't know, you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. We will be right back after this break. See you soon.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind $100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.
Hey, I'm Antonique Smith.
Hello, everyone. It's Kiara Sheard.
Hey, I'm Taj.
I'm Coco.
And I'm Lily. And we're SWV.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
An Alabama Republican group apologizes after they accidentally used a picture of a GOP elephant containing Ku Klux Klan imagery. Now, the Lawrence County Republican Party posted an image on its Facebook page of the GOP elephant with the white spaces between the animal's legs drawn to resemble a hooded Klansman. Now, there were calls from the local NAACP chapter for the Lawrence County Republican Party Chairman Shannon Terry to resign from his position, but Terry released the following statement about the incident. Now, this is what the statement says. I will not be resigning from my elected office on the Lawrence County School Board. The voters of District 4 elected me to represent them, and I am proud of the accomplishments of this administration over the past 6 years. I look forward to continuing to strive to give every student in Lawrence County the best opportunity to be successful. I regret the mistake that was made, and it was just that, an unintended mistake. The image posted by me on a political Facebook page was not done with any malicious or harmful intent. Once made aware of the negative notion of the picture, I immediately replaced it and followed up with an apology and explained an explanation the next day. Now, my error was rushing to post a thank you note to the outgoing chairperson, and in doing so, I did not properly review a cut and paste image used in the post from an internet search for a, quote, GOP elephant. I do not support or agree with any hate group agenda and certainly would not try to further their cause. I strive to be an open and honest person who works to be a positive influence in the community. I feel I am being incorrectly portrayed by some of this unfortunate issue. Now, I have apologized, taken responsibility for the post, corrected the image, and posted an explanation. I know that these actions to address this regretful error may not satisfy everyone, but I believe they demonstrate the sincerity of my feelings on this matter. Now, I want to take it over to our panelists to get their thoughts on this. The apology does seem very sincere, but what are your thoughts on those who saw this and may not have even heard the apology or just saw the image and that's all they know about this so far?
Can I go first?
Yes, please.
Thank you. This is as insincere an apology as it gets, and we see these all the time. You don't accidentally post this. You post this on purpose, and then you dial it back when somebody calls you out. That's what it is. And I don't even know if it's truly a GOP picture, you know, a search for a GOP picture that happened to have this, or whether this person had it in their camera roll. But there's no way you accidentally post this. And what I found particularly problematic, as I always do in these apologies, is that he had the audacity to have the righteous indignation to say, this isn't going to satisfy anyone or everyone, but you should be, you know, able to see the sincerity of my actions, and I'm a good person in the community, and basically don't hold me accountable because I'm telling you that what you didn't see, or what you saw, you didn't see. And you don't accidentally post this. And for this to be posted, if I understood it correctly, on something relating to a school board is particularly abhorrent, because we see how schools and how public education is being politicized across the country, right? And how there are direct attacks on what people can teach my 3 boys who happen to be sitting in a public school, right? So the idea that somebody is posting something like this to a school board or anything related to schools is particularly abhorrent. But to sum it up, essentially, I'm just incensed by these kinds of apologies because they're not actually apologetic, and you don't accidentally do this.
Dr. Carter? What's your thoughts?
I would have to agree with Matt. I mean, this always happens, right? People do something, then someone calls them out on it, and then it's, I didn't mean to, right? But since when is that a defense? I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to offend you. I didn't mean to post this racist meme. I didn't mean to look like I support the KKK. And like, quite frankly, at this particular point in the history of the GOP, which is basically, you know, a thin cover for lots of about white supremacists, whether they're KKK members or not, this is not that far off from probably where your politics are. So I agree that this total, you know, mea culpa, and that the people elected me and this shouldn't reflect on me. I mean, you can't make good decisions. You certainly don't make good decisions where social media is concerned. So then we're supposed to trust that you're going to make good decisions where the education of the children that you're empowered to impact. We're supposed to believe that you can handle that, but you can't handle a social media post? I think not. But, you know, there will likely not be many repercussions for this person because the voters that chose them chose him probably for many of the politics that were captured in that image.
Michael?
Yeah, looking at this story, so I see that the elephant was created really for Mother Jones' story, dealing with hate crimes and hatred and things like this. But it's like, okay, so are you so desensitized to the Ku Klux Klan you didn't realize there was 3 Klans heads inside the elephant? So this causes me to ask some other questions here. Sometimes we see those images on social media and they say, well, if you think this way, you'll see a woman in the picture. If you think this way, you'll see something else in the picture, right? But it's like the 3 Klans heads. You don't see it there. So this whole anti-critical race theory, this whole fight over school boards, banning books, things like this is going to be a hot button issue in the 2022 midterm elections. Okay. And once again, this is an example of why it's so important who we have elected in local office, because of the decisions that they make, and especially being in control over education. So we'll see how this plays out. But I don't understand why you didn't see the 3 Klansmen there, unless you're not afraid of Klansmen.
Well, we know who all would be afraid of Klansmen. And then the fact that, Dr. Carter, you pointed it out, how can we trust that you leave our kids' education in your hands when you can't even look at a simple photo and that you posted online? You're in a leadership position, so you have to be cognizant of imagery and things that you write and so forth. But I do feel that a lot of individuals like to push the envelope and see, oh, let me see what I can do and see how much I can get away with. And like you said, when someone says something, they go, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. So yeah, this is a very, very interesting topic. But to segue into our next story involving the KKK, the GOP says that they are not racist, but do they really listen to what they say? Because it's really not far from what the KKK sees of the world. Take a look.
Anti-racist is a whole weird ideology that, quite frankly, tries to make white people second-class citizens.
White Americans are being treated as second-class citizens.
There are now 2 standards of justice.
The dual system of justice.
They care more about the illegal immigrants at the border than they do the American people. They're giving out handouts to them.
Our country just don't care about us Americans. It's all about a handout to all the illegal immigrants.
The foreign-born population is now growing by 132,000 people every month.
The non-whites are reproducing rapidly.
If we continue on this trajectory, eventually there will be no more native-born Americans.
Our people literally are an endangered species. Our people are having few children. We've got to start protecting our race.
If you're white, you have to go to the back of the line, discriminating against white people.
There is racial discrimination going on right now in this country against massive numbers of white Americans.
How precisely is diversity our strength?
So how is diversity our strength?
Well, there you have it. Let's go to our panel, because I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about that. Let's start off with Michael.
Yeah, I saw that video. I watched it on Twitter today. I watched it 3 times. It was hilarious. So this is the fear that Donald Trump tapped into in 2015 and 2016. The fear of the browning of America. The fear that by the year 2043, white people will no longer be the majority population in this country. And not all white people have a problem with this, but the ones that voted for Donald Trump do. The 74 million people that voted for Donald Trump, the close to 74 million white people, or however many white people it was, they have a problem with this. And when we look at the 2020 census, that was the first census since 1790 where the U.S. population of white people dropped below 60%. So there is a real fear in this country, and the backlash, the political violence that we saw inflicted upon the U.S. Capitol January 6, 2021 is reminiscent of the political violence that we saw during Reconstruction to help bring about an end to Reconstruction. And racism was weaponized in the hands of Donald Trump because he targeted 4 cities for recounts. He targeted Detroit, where I am, and I live about 4 minutes away from the TCF Center where they were counting the votes. He targeted Detroit, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and weaponized race and sent the domestic terrorists to the U.S. Capitol building to interrupt a constitutionally mandated process to certify the Electoral College votes. So we have to be cognizant of this. We saw things like this, similar to this during Reconstruction. This is dangerous. And this is why elections have consequences. And the white nationalist party, this is why we have to make sure Democrats maintain control of the House and the Senate, and then vote as many as you can out at the local level as well. And I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but I'm sure as hell ain't stupid. Okay, I see what's taking place.
Matt?
Yeah, I think Michael hit the nail on the head, and I think Dr. Carter alluded to this earlier in talking about how the felonies, the ones that were chosen, were weaponized, in particular as it relates to that previous story we had with Ron DeSantis, because similar to what Michael just mentioned, in that instance, he pointed out Broward County and Miami-Dade County as being the counties where these 20 people were arrested for election fraud. And the larger point to that is this. This is precisely how the GOP, which has long touted itself as the party of values and, you know, the party of morals, allowed itself to be hijacked by Donald Trump. Because the reality is all these white people, suburban and otherwise, many have this sentiment, maybe not to the extent that they're willing to go on TV and talk about the browning of America, but they have that fear, right? And that fear is fomenting. And that fear is exactly why people said, oh, well, I guess I'll vote for this Donald Trump guy. And then we ended up with 4 years of absolute insanity because that party got hijacked and is still in his clutches. And I think that's what you're seeing with this, is that this is how a lot of white people feel. Frankly, they feel like society's being taken away from them. And you see this in a lot of the rhetoric that we see, you know, return to traditional values. For instance, there's a sheriff here in the county that I live in. And every time he gives a public statement, he talks about trying to make it back like Mayberry. He wants to return this area to Mayberry, right? Why do you use that imagery? Use that imagery because you want to try to get all the white people out there who you want to come vote for you to, you know, have this idea of an idyllic 1950s America where their neighbor wasn't a black person that they were afraid of. So I think that's what we're seeing in this rhetoric. And I think that it's particularly dangerous, especially in light of the recent the recent search. Look at me using the wrong word. Search at Mar-a-Lago, where what you see in response is people who used to be very pro law enforcement now saying we can't trust the FBI. We're going to make threats. So I think this is kind of part and parcel with some of that fomenting sentiment. And on top of that, I think it also shows you the moving goalpost. Because what we're seeing from Republicans now is if things aren't going their way, they find a way to attack it. But if they find that beneficial to their ideology, they find a way to support it. For instance, the attacks now on law enforcement.
And you actually made a good point. I was talking to someone the other day, and I said that very thing. I said, what happened to Back the Blue and Blue Lives Matter? Those very same people who were saying that are now saying, let's go attack the FBI building, you know, and it's like, what happened to that? You know, so you should make some very good points. Dr. Carter, do you have anything to add?
I was going to say, to your point, Therese, one thing that happens with white supremacists, white nationalists, they will always go after white people that they think are against them, right? I think there's a certain comfort that many whites took in their whiteness up until this point. And what we saw on January 6th, right, they were talking about hanging Mike Pence. We saw them ouster Liz Cheney, even though her voting record was the most closely aligned with Donald Trump, because she basically said, let me do my job and actually defend the country as opposed to a man or a party, right? The way that many people wanted her to. And this kind of rhetoric, right? I mean, I always say it's the duck test, right? It's very simple. If it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So no matter what we call this thing, we can call it the Republican Party, we can call it white nationalists, whatever we call it, that's what it is, right? It looks like this rhetoric because that's what it is. It is basically taking up these talking points and trying to clean them up, right? And make them more acceptable. I mean, it's like when we had that dalliance with the alt-right for a minute, right? It was still white supremacist nationalism. It just wore a suit and tie, right? And so now we see in this particular moment, these same forces coming together and, as you say, attacking law enforcement and every other agency that they think is not working in their interest of maintaining white dominance. And when you've been the dominant group, everything that looks fair or equal looks like an attack on you. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I think, kind of for many of our communities, we already knew what the stakes were. We already know how white people act when they feel threatened. We've had hundreds of years of evidence of what that looks like. But I think for many whites in particular, this is the first time they've actually seen what it looks like when white people are attacking other white people for not towing the line in the same kind of way. And it doesn't matter whether it's the FBI or local law enforcement or even other allied politicians. And the only disagreement I would have with Matt is I don't think the GOP got hijacked. I think they willingly gave it up just for the sake of winning, right? And I think they thought that they could control this tide. But now they've sort of built the monster. And of course, they can't tame it. So the only thing that they do, because they're so craven in their lust for power, because they can't win a national election without some of these tricks. They can't win elections in lots of places without resorting to this nonsense. Is say, we'll cast our lot with white nationalism if it means we can maintain power, still not recognizing how dangerous white supremacy even is to them.
I mean, I'm from Michigan. I'm from Belleville. I'm not from Detroit. The rest of my family's from Detroit, but I'm from Belleville. I grew on a farm up there. But just the governor of Michigan being threatened, they were going to kill her.
Right.
And it's
right.
it's like, it's just baffling. I don't know. It's scary. But on that note, we're going to go to our next story, and then I'll come back to you guys to get your thoughts. So the Democratic National Committee, they are launching a 7-figure TV and other media buy. Now, this goal and why they're doing this is to highlight a range of Democratic efforts and victories. And here's one of their newest commercials. Take a look.
Look at these Democrats, a 50-50 split Senate. And you look at Joe Biden, suddenly you have this huge climate change plan, this huge plan to lower drug costs, to help Medicare recipients. Well, the head of the Republican Senate's talking about increasing costs for Medicare and Social Security and taxing poor and middle-class Americans. You've got an economic rescue plan that's led to the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. You've got a massive bipartisan infrastructure plan that was passed. You've got the first significant gun safety legislation passed in over a decade. You've got the China competitiveness bill, confirmation of the first black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court. And then this package, which is landmark. Yeah. This has been an extraordinarily successful 2 years. Any way you cut it, even Republicans have to admit this privately, and they are. It's been a hell of a run.
All right, Dr. Carter, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, this is what people have been saying for the longest. Like, the Democrats just sort of do stuff and it just sort of happens and nobody quite knows what it's about. I mean, you have to give people an idea to hold their hat on, right? Most people aren't going to go look at what bills were passed and what the content of those bills are. You need to give people something digestible. You need to give them a soundbite. You need to frame your administration for them, because if people are just paying attention to their own lives, they're going to say, I know gas prices were high. There's a pandemic called COVID, and now there's the monkeypox, and we can't get vaccines for that. I also know I saw polio coming. I also know that chicken wings were high as I don't know what, months ago. So that's what people know. So you have to actually give people a way to think about what it is you do, and don't expect, the voters won't believe this, or people are not going to go to congress.gov and read the content of a bill. Most Congress people don't read the content of their own bills, quite frankly. You have to give people a way. So I think finally they realize how important messaging is. This is something that the GOP has done to great effect. They're actually very good at is they message consistently. And the Democrats have not done it. And basically from now until the next presidential election, but certainly to the midterms, they have to beat this drum. Lowest unemployment in history. We've seen, all of these great strides at, this Inflation Reduction Act, right? We've seen these environmental this environmental package, right? We've done all of these things, even though people said we couldn't do it, facing insurmountable odds. This is the drumbeat, right? Because you better know that the Republicans have their talking points already. They're going to talk about inflation. They're going to talk about taxes. They're going to talk about the fact that, CRT. They're going to talk about the fact that this coronavirus doesn't seem to be dissipating and all the things. They're going to throw everything at you. So you need to do the same. And your message has to be consistent, clear, to the point, and you cannot stop. I mean, like, it has to be basically all the time, that anybody who is likely to vote for you can say chapter and verse what it is that you've done. Even if they don't really know what it is and don't really understand it, they have to be able to say, well, Joe Biden has overseen the lowest unemployment in the last 50 years. They have to be able to say that. Do they need to know what the employment rate is? No. They just need to know that there's something there that they can hang their hat on. And I think, it's about time that the Democrats got their head in the game.
Well, it also offers hope for those who feel, over the last 2-3 years, there's been a lot of despair and negativity. And so when they put out these messages showing what they are doing, it puts out hope. Like, okay, maybe they didn't like them before, but they're like, okay, I can see that they're making these changes. So that makes me hopeful that there's going to be a brighter future. So I think that's also the importance of the messaging. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Sentiments as I have this entire spot, because I think she's spot on. And only thing I would add to that is a couple of things. First, I mean, when you're looking at a political commercial, political ad, we know people don't have long attention spans. And I think one of the best uses of that time is just delineating literally every good thing that you've done. It's funny that Roland's not here today because he talks about it almost every week, right? The issues that Democrats have had with messaging, I think Dr. Carter was exactly right. I think the GOP is way better than the Democrats at messaging. Not only have they been very consistent with their messaging, they find a way to bully the Democrats' messaging by talking louder over them and just always moving the ball on what the conversation's about. And I don't think you get to do that against an ad like this because it's just a clear showing of the receipts. It shows everything that they've done in the last 2 years and how impactful those things are. And I think that's incredibly important. And I think her idea that this needs to be incessant is 100% right. Because as we know, leading up to the next elections, people are going to need to be reminded of this, because what do we hear in the 24-hour news cycle? We hear way more about Trump and the GOP than we hear about the Democrats. A lot of times with the Democrats, it's responsive. It's not a proactive thing. And I think this is a good way to try to curb that tide. But I think this has to be the tip of the iceberg, and the rest of the iceberg has to be consistent messaging just like this, where they're continuing to feed to voters all the good things that have happened in the last 2 years under Biden's administration.
Valid point. Michael.
Well, first of all, the really ironic thing about this is it's Joe Scarborough of MSNBC, a former Republican congressman. He's the one who was saying this. That was the person talking. I saw it on MSNBC when they ran it the first time. It's fantastic. It's absolutely correct. This is what I've been saying before on this show, on Faraji Muhammad's show, The Culture, on my show, the African History Network show. 3 weeks ago when I was on Reverend Al Sharpton's radio show, he had me on as his co-host for 2 hours. This is what I've been breaking down. This is why it's important for people to go to whitehouse.gov and look at this stuff, because the information is there. Now, Democrats have a problem with messaging, and they're really starting to message more now. I've been seeing commercials. There have been super PACs taking out ads, touting the Inflation Reduction Act as well. And they need to spend money with Black-owned media, Roland Martin Unfiltered, Rio, et cetera. They need to make sure they spend money. Take out these ads. They're gonna spend millions of dollars. Planned Parenthood is spending money for the midterm elections, et cetera. They need to make sure they spend this money in Black-owned media, and we have to put our foot up their collective behinds to make sure they do this as well. But Joe Biden, after Labor Day, he's going to go on a victory tour to tout the successes that they've had, the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, the infrastructure bill. And just very quickly, Ron Klain, White House Chief of Staff, he was interviewed by Politico. He said, we now have a presidency where the president has delivered the largest economic recovery plan since Roosevelt, the largest infrastructure plan since Eisenhower, the most judges confirmed since Kennedy, the second largest healthcare bill since Johnson, President Lyndon Baines Johnson, and the largest climate change bill in history. This is all in less than 2 years with a 50-50 Senate. With a 50-50 Senate. This is why Democrats have to expand their lead in the House and expand their lead in the Senate and get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act pushed through, get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act pushed through, and some other bills as well. But this is what you have to do, is messaging and mobilization for these 2022 midterm elections.
You all make some very valid points. We're going to have to take it to a break. For those just now tuning in, or you've been here the whole time, but I'm going to tell you anyways, this is Roland Martin Unfiltered. We'll be right back right here on Black Star Network.
I challenge myself as an artist and knowing that I'm going to challenge the audience, right? So oftentimes you come into this business off of one project where everybody's like, ooh, you stand out. Okay, for me it was Barbershop, Ricky, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Ricky was nothing like me growing up, right? Nothing like me growing up. But if that's people's first experience with you, right, as an audience member, they tend to think that's the real you, right? So, you know, for me, after that, I got a whole bunch of offers to play roles just like Ricky, right? This Tupac-esque type of thug, right? And I just said no over and over again. And then you keep trying to do other things. Then I went through a series of romantic movies and romantic leads, and you know, I always try to bring some sort of gravitas to those roles. And then it was like, okay, well, but before I get into all of that, let me hit y'all with, you know, For Color Girls, and, you know, step outside of the realm of, you know, what you expect of me to do as an audience member in terms of being this romantic lead and everything. Because I didn't get into this business to be the romantic lead, you know, that dude. Like, I didn't get into this business. You can get locked in. You can totally get locked in.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, you see the headlines. All frightening, right? Interest rates are going up. The recession is on the way. The stock market is up and down. But you know what they say, scared money don't make money. That's why I'm excited on our next Get Wealthy to have a conversation with someone who has written a new book, Fearless Finances, and she's going to share exactly what you need to do to secure your bag regardless of the ups and downs of the economy or the stock market.
Oftentimes you can start with as little as $5.
That's right here, only on Get Wealthy on Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.
What's up, y'all? I'm Will Packer.
I'm Chrisette Michelle.
Hi, I'm Chaley Rose, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
DeJanae Lumbus has been missing from Aurora, Colorado since August 10th. Now, the 15-year-old is 5'2", weighs 180 pounds with brown hair and hazel eyes. Now, anyone with any information about DeJanae Lumbus, please call the Aurora, Colorado Police Department at 303-627-3100. Again, that's 303-627-3100. Now, transitioning over to Kentucky. In Kentucky, a fourth officer connected to the killing of Breonna Taylor has been fired. Now, Sergeant Kyle Meany, who joined the Louisville Metro Police Department in 2013, was terminated after meeting with Chief Erica Shields. Now, the termination comes 2 weeks after the federal grand jury indicted Meany and 3 other former officers. Now, this is a statement from Shields, which states, "I made the decision to terminate Sergeant Kyle Meany after careful consideration and not with ease." Shields said in a statement that was provided Friday through a police spokesperson. And it continues by stating, "I fully respect the judicial process and realize that Sergeant Meany has yet to be heard before a jury of his peers. That being said, he is facing multiple federal charges after a lengthy investigation by the DOJ. As an employee, the character of our organization is paramount, and it is not reasonable to expect continued employment under such conditions." Now, in West Virginia, a deputy faces federal charges of depriving an individual of his civil rights by using excessive force and writing a false report to cover it up. Deputy Sheriff Lance Kuritsa is accused of punching and elbowing a victim in the face and, after being handcuffed, spraying him with pepper spray and striking him. Now, Kuritsa faces up to 10 years in prison for civil rights violations and up to 20 years for falsifying a report. Now, there's a civil lawsuit claiming that Mississippi police have terrorized residents in a small Mississippi town by subjecting them to false arrests, excessive force, and intimidation. Now, the civil rights organization Julian is seeking a temporary restraining order against Lexington Police Department to, quote, demand protection for Lexington's largely black population. Now, this lawsuit came Tuesday after the organization obtained a July audio recording of the former Lexington police chief, Sam Dobbins, using racial slurs and talking about how many people he has killed in the line of duty. Now, the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting says Dobbins denies making the slurs. Now, right now you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Hi, I'm BB Winans.
Hi, I'm Kim Burrell.
Hi, I'm Carl Payne.
Hey, everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and while he's doing Unfiltered, I'm practicing the wobble.
Mississippi's Jackson State University is partnering with Microsoft to jumpstart the company's new TechSpark initiative. Now, this initiative is designed to accelerate digital equity and support inclusive economic opportunities within the STEM field. Now, Dr. Jacqueline Jackson, an associate professor of computer science at Jackson State University, and J.J. Townsend of Microsoft joins us now to tell us more about this partnership. Well, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so tell us a little bit more about this new initiative.
Yeah, well, Microsoft, go ahead, which one?
JJ, go on ahead.
Well, last year we announced the Microsoft TechSpark expansion to Jackson, Mississippi, and so I get to lead that. And like you mentioned, it's intended to support with employment, support with entrepreneurship, expanding computer science education, and also enabling access to digital skills learning opportunities. And so, this partnership with Jackson State University is one of our first. It's one that we're all really excited about, and Dr. Jackson's been great about, leading the effort for cybersecurity at Jackson State University. And so I'll definitely let her share a little bit more about the specifics of the program. But yeah, we're excited to be here in Jackson and supporting Jackson State University.
All right, Dr. Jackson.
Well, we're very excited to be joining with Microsoft on this opportunity. Our relationship began through a volunteer effort to reach out to our public high schools to teach them computer science. And from that, the conversation continued about where we wanted to go next. And one of the areas that we wanted to continue investing in was in cybersecurity. So when JJ and his team approached us with this opportunity, we were very excited to be able to provide our students with access to additional tools and resources, as well as an opportunity for them to become engaged in cybersecurity.
Sounds like such a unique opportunity. Let's go ahead and bring our panel in and see if they have some questions for you, Dr. Jackson, as well as for you, Mr. Townsend. So who wants to go first? We'll have Matt go first. Do you have any questions about this program?
I do. Good evening to y'all. Thanks for joining us. My question is basically, how do students get into the program, number one? Number two, is it a pipeline program for all 4 years, or is it, students can join anytime in that 4 years? And particularly, what is kind of the emphasis on the back end in terms of helping those students who are particularly interested in cybersecurity have jobs in the cybersecurity field, whether with Microsoft or other firms?
Well, right now it's open to any student who's interested. So we started working over the summer by sending out some announcements through class recruiting, asking for students who were interested in cybersecurity to come and join us. We also began working with a group of freshmen over the summer, and we are teaching a security awareness class in the fall. So we hope to continue to spread the message of this particular field and how important it is. So what we did was to set a target goal of 100. So we're going to be recruiting 25 students per year for the next 4 years. And what we will be doing is providing them with some educational opportunities to kind of introduce them to cybersecurity, get them trained, and then we're going to assist them in obtaining an internship through one of our established partners.
I just wanted to comment on that internship. I know growing up, my family never expressed anything about internships because majority of them didn't go to college. So it's very important to take on these types of internships, and the fact that you guys are not only having them, but navigating these students in that route, like, hey, this is something that you should take advantage of, is such an excellent opportunity. Dr. Carter, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so on the internship piece, I think that's really important because I know a lot of students are being funneled into unpaid internships. Lots of things don't pay. So having the possibility to earn funding while also learning is super important. So what is is there any support while they're in school? Are there any sort of competitive scholarships that are attached to this? Is there any kind of in-school funding during the academic year that's attached to this program? Sounds really exciting, by the way, so congratulations.
Thank you. And with the generous gift of Microsoft, students will be funded So we do have funds to provide to our students as they are navigating through the program. The internships that we have through our external partners are funded as well. And we also have a set of faculty members who have ongoing research programs in cybersecurity that are funded as well. So we realize that students oftentimes need assistance with navigating college, and so we try very hard to make sure that our experience come with some level of funding.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just add, I mean, one of the things we've been talking about, just how do we continue to expand the program? I mean, we just announced this and we just got started. So we're excited to support with whether it's job fairs, supporting with interview skills, other job readiness, in-school support that the CSET department hope to take on through the program. So we're just getting started, and you're going to definitely hear more about this expanded partnership.
JJ, are there other schools that this is going to be expanding to as well?
Well, we haven't, in terms of Mississippi, we haven't met directly with other schools, but, you know, clearly we have, you know, Tougaloo is another school that's, you know, close proximity that we're hoping to engage with soon. We have a few others that are in the region that we want to support. But last year, the company had a cybersecurity skills initiative to address the cybersecurity shortage. That specific initiative mostly focused on community colleges. We saw that as one of a great asset that we have that could, you know, support with the shortage that we have. Probably familiar with the 700,000 open cybersecurity jobs that's out there. And what that means is, you know, we have that opens the country up to cyber attacks, ransomware. You know, we have issues with our supply chain when we don't have people to fill these cybersecurity jobs. So it's a huge problem that, you know, we're hoping to address with these types of initiatives.
Now, I was reading up on this, and they say you train these students with real-life scenarios. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so in computer science, we often talk about toy problems, right? So these are things that we kind of make up. But we see now that it's more important to give students realistic experiences. So I know we offered a industrial cybersecurity class last semester, and so Walmart actually came in and presented a scenario, and students actually worked toward that scenario. So our goal is to provide students with as close to as real as possible, because when they enter the workforce, we want them to be able to go in running on day one. So a lot of our partners are asking how they can assist us, and that's one thing that we mentioned, that we want to bring real life experiences into our classroom. So some of them have stepped up to actually help us to craft problems that our students will be working on during the academic year.
That's pretty impressive. Michael, I haven't heard from you yet.
Yeah, well, this is a great program. Question that I had, when I was in middle school, I was in a pre-engineering program here in Detroit Public Schools. So students who are looking at going into this program maybe next summer, what are some of the classes that they should take right now to prepare them to be more successful in this program and eventually go into cybersecurity?
I think any program that kind of introduces them to the field, as well as some basic programming. And the great thing about cybersecurity is that you don't necessarily have to come in with a background. So I think you just have to come in with a willingness to learn something new. I think that if a student possesses an ability to think critically, they have analytical reasoning skills, and they're just curious, then they are a perfect fit for cybersecurity.
What are a couple of those computer languages that you would recommend that they take classes in?
I think right now I'm hearing a lot of the schools are using Python. I know that when we worked with our high schools last year, that was the language that they were using. Some of the schools also use Java as well. We here at Jackson State program in C++. So there are a variety of different programming languages. I wouldn't necessarily focus on a programming language, but focus on the skill set, building the ability to break down a problem and to analyze it and to come up with solutions. Teaching them how to code in a particular language is not as difficult as it sounds, as long as they have that ability to think through a problem critically.
Understand the flow charts. Yeah, I understand.
The flow charts. Yes.
I used to take computer languages here, so I understand. Okay, thank you.
And so what are the prerequisites as far as, do they have to make certain grades? Because you just said they don't really have to have much knowledge in the field to get into it, but do they have to have a certain grade average? Kind of explain some of the prerequisites.
Well, me personally, I don't focus so much on a grade point average, because I think that that's not the only way to judge what a student can do. I'm looking for students who are willing and ready to work hard. I've seen instances where students may have suffered grade-wise, but once we incorporated the program, then their grades turned around. So we're just looking for students who have a genuine interest in learning how to secure our well-being of our nation. And so we will accept them into our program. And if they are struggling academically, then we will make sure that they are participating in our tutorial programs that we have across campus.
I love that. It's such an amazing opportunity, and good luck to those students who get to the 25 students that have the opportunity to participate in this. So first off, I wanted to thank you, Dr. Jackson. I also wanted to thank you, JJ Townsend. And I also wanted to thank our panelists who were joining us today. We had Michael Imhotep, the host of the African History Network show. We have civil rights attorney Matt Manning, and we also have Dr. Nyambi Carter joining us, Nyambi Carter joining us. And I'm sorry, I believe I forgot somebody. Did I forget someone? Michael, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And so, yes, and Matt as well. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. Very great show. You know, for those watching, this is Roland Unfiltered on Black Star Network. Make sure you tune in for our next show. I want to thank you all for watching, and have a great weekend.
talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Your money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.